This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of May 19th, 2024. Content authenticity statement: 100% of this week's newsletter was generated by me, a human. There's a link at the top of the newsletter to learn why this kind of disclosure is a good idea and may be required for anyone doing business in any capacity with the EU in the near future. What's on my mind this week? Are you falling behind on generative AI? This past week, I had the pleasure and privilege to be the keynote speaker at the Australian Food and Grocery Council's Food and Grocery Australia conference in Melbourne, Australia. If there was one refrain that I heard more than any other from conference participants, it was the worry about falling behind. Something that Katie actually talked about in the Almost Timely, the In-Ear Insights newsletter. Wait, no, Inbox Insights. Inbox Insights newsletter for Trust Insights this week. Now, a few of the ways that this manifested at the event. One speaker said, America moves ahead boldly, sometimes even recklessly. When it comes to new technology, Australia, by comparison, tends to be much more conservative, and we risk being left behind when it comes to AI. Another participant tearfully expressed a deep concern that they were falling behind and that they would have no future career. Another executive said, "We fell behind on social media and mobile marketing. We can't afford to fall behind on AI." Which raises the difficult and important question: are you falling behind? What does that mean? To each person, falling behind means something different. But the general top level concept is that something's moving and you're not moving fast enough to keep up with it. You're chasing something and it's moving further away from you. And the fear is that you get left behind in the dust as the world moves on. In the context of AI, especially generative AI, that means keeping up with what today's technology can do and deploying it in ways that keep you current. But that still isn't really tangible or concrete. So let's break it down further into personal, organizational, and national. At a personal level, why would someone be afraid of falling behind? I mean, it's fairly straightforward. Other people can take opportunities away from you. Uh, as noted in the 2024 Work Trends Index from Microsoft and LinkedIn, the survey pointed out that 66% of corporate leaders say they wouldn't hire someone with AI skills, and they would choose a less senior person with AI skills over a more senior person without AI skills. That's a pretty justified fear. It's not just hiring. The very real fears and concerns about falling behind show up in worries about relevance in the workplace. If you fall behind, your career won't advance as quickly as others. Your earnings potential may diminish compared to those who use tools like AI to be more productive and capable. In addition to the tangible financial fears, part of the fear of falling behind is a loss of control, a loss of agency. When you're behind on a particular technology, you feel like you have less control over your life, your career, your choices. And if a machine consumes a significant portion of your tasks, you may begin to question what value you bring at all. A fourth and final part of falling behind as a person, at the personal level, is the general feeling of inadequacy every day as the news constantly hammers you about how fast AI is moving. New models, new architectures, new features, new capabilities, new everything. It's a very breathless pace that can feel incredibly overwhelming, especially if you're comparing yourself and your knowledge to other people. At an organizational level, fears of falling behind manifest in worries about competition. If your competitor falls behind, you produce less, you get less done. I'm sorry, if your company falls behind, you produce less, right? You get less done. You're not as productive, agile, or fast as a competitor in every business function. The smarter, faster, more productive company typically ends up with more market share, more customers, bigger margins, higher profits, etc. That is why the C-suite is so unsettled by generative AI. It's a highly disruptive technology that could allow a smaller competitor to punch far above their weight, seizing market share from the incumbents. There was a great quote this past week in the Hollywood Reporter about the covert use of AI in entertainment from David Defendi, who's, I believe, a French screenwriter. He said, "Producers, writers, everyone is using AI, but they're scared to admit it publicly. But it's being used because it is a tool that gives an advantage. If you don't use it, you will be at a disadvantage to those who are." That's a accurate statement and it really encapsulates well those fears, the fears about decreased productivity, about competitive disadvantage, right? And at a national level, the worry about falling behind is about losing a competitive edge against other nations on the world stage, losing companies, losing talent, losing prestige. The list is endless, right? Part of the reason, for example, that Mistral, the French company, is so prominent is because France specifically and the EU generally is deeply concerned about a tech oligopoly, again, in Silicon Valley. And they want to have some kind of bulwark within the EU that says, hey, we can use this technology too, and we are not beholden to American corporate interests. Totally valid. The fears of falling behind are fundamentally rooted in a fear of loss, right? And each of the fears is like a fractal, it's the same pattern repeated over and over again from the very small to the very large. The fear of competition occurs at the individual level, worried about employment prospects, to the national level, worried about losing market share to a more agile international competitor. It's one of the reasons why every country is spending money like crazy trying to build AI capabilities. Now, when you face a fear, there generally are three categories of responses, right? You face the fear head on, you remain paralyzed in place, or you run away. Each solution has a time and place when it's appropriate. But here's the thing about these fears, all of them are valid, and we all share them. Right? No one is immune to these. Now, you might scoff at that statement. There's no way that I have these fears, right? I'm elbows deep in AI all day, every day. How could I possibly feel like I'm falling behind? Well, because there's tens of thousands of new papers being released every month. When I read these new technical papers, see new sample code on GitHub and stuff, I absolutely do feel behind in those areas. Am I actually? It depends on who you're comparing it to. But the fact is, there's a tsunami of new stuff every single day, much of which is exceptionally promising. And it's hard to keep up with it all. So, what do? Well, first, you have to figure out what behind means to you. Do you feel behind because there's just a lot of general conversation on the topic and the buzz makes you think something really important is happening, some FOMO? Or do you have more focused examples of shifts in your business and your industry, actual data that hints at the fact that you're behind or you're about to be? Are you behind on something that doesn't matter? For a couple of years, people asked me repeatedly, why was I so behind on crypto and Web3? It was the hottest thing, and I wasn't talking about it at all. I'm missing the boat. I'm 100% way behind. Yeah, because I was 100% way behind because that's not a direction I was planning on going. Being behind is irrelevant if where things are going is not the way you want to go. It's the wrong direction. Like, yeah, I had my ridiculous little coin for like a hot second, and I didn't even buy it. So, um, I was behind on something that didn't matter. Not to me. That's what I was going to focus on. And if generative AI really has no place in your business, that's okay. If your industry is saying, nope, we're out, then it doesn't matter whether you're behind or not as an industry. It might matter for you personally. So let's say you have some valid specific use cases where, yeah, compared to a competitor or maybe to another industry, you are behind. How do you catch up? First, it helps to understand the specific problem you're trying to solve. I put a thing in last week's newsletter. I'll put it again in this week's newsletter. The TRIPS framework from Trust Insights for generative AI is a great place to start. 5-part framework, totally free. Just grab the download, grab the PDF. Nothing to fill out for that one. And you go through the use cases. You have all the things that you do, and you analyze, which things are the highest priority for generative AI. Once you've established a use case, then you apply the 5P framework to the use case. You know what the purpose is. Hopefully, you know what some way of measuring the performance, measuring the outcome, and then you figure out the people, the process, and the platform to accomplish the thing. Here's an example. It's something I did at the event at the breakfast the second morning. I was sitting with a sales representative, and she said she was unsure how to make all the different ideas from the event gel together into something coherent, something tangible she could take back to the office and do something with. I asked her, and we'll call her Kara since FGA operates under Chatham House rules. Um, I, I said, ask Kara, what are you trying to accomplish? And she said that her job was all about getting her company's products and services to be sold by a specific market segment. So she represents a company that makes stuff that sells it to grocery stores, and then the grocery stores sell that to consumers. She said it was getting harder to have her company's message resonate in the face of rampant inflation because their stuff costs a little bit more. And she said she felt like generative AI in particular was going to make it even harder for her to keep up with and compete against the bigger players in the market. And I said, great. That is a great place to start because sales in general, but sales messaging is a solid use case for generative AI. There's a very clear purpose. We want to sell more stuff. There's a very clear measure of performance. We sold more stuff. We know who the people are, people like Kara, who have a sense of the sales process, right? So they know what they're doing. All we need to do is take those 4 Ps along with the platform and start putting the puzzle together. Part of the sales process for Kara is identifying the reason someone would buy from her company versus a larger competitor. Right? Their value proposition was about buying local and supporting the Australian economy. Conveniently, the previous night of the event, the Australian federal government released their next fiscal year budget, which was a whopping 400,000 words spread out over 5 different budget documents. But it was a hot topic, like super hot topic. 400,000 words. Yeah, as you as a person, you're not reading that, not in one night. But it's absolutely manageable for today's language model. So I took the budget uh, at breakfast, dumped the whole budget in a language model. I was using Google Gemini's 1.5, the new version, 1.5 Flash. And I said, what kind of ordered effects will this budget have on the consumer, on the Australian consumer? What sort of investments was Australia making in domestic companies? How would it impact the food and grocery industry? And Gemini gave us a really nice analysis of what the budget would do for consumers as well as Kara's clients. From there, I had the language model recall what it knew about Kara's company. It's a reasonably well-known company in Australia, and some of her clients. And we built what I call an ICP2 profile, which stands for Ideal Consumer Profile plus Ideal Company plus Company Profile. Like, who are you? Who is your customer? With that knowledge, we inserted that profile. We directed the language model to build a sales presentation, or at least the outline for one of Kara's customers, using all of the ordered effects of the new budget, all the concerns, all the pain points, the customer's pain points, the consumer's pain points, you name it. They took the sales outline, and it was a good start, and put through Tams and Webster's Red Thread framework, which is a fantastic framework for writing compelling presentations. And what we ended up with was a very solid, thorough, timely, and relevant presentation that she could go give tomorrow to any of her customers and stand a good chance of persuading them that not only did she understand the issues, but that her company's products and services would be a good fit for those issues. And it had all of the timeliness of saying, here's what's in the Australian budget. Here's how it's going to impact your business. And hey, my company is the solution to these impacts. How long did this take? About 25 minutes. And that was mostly because we were eating at the same time. Why did this work? Kara was clear about her purpose and her performance, the outcome that she needed, right? Sell more stuff. Was she behind on the platform? Yeah, but she wasn't behind on her sales knowledge, her sales skills, her knowledge of the customer and their customers, and the process by which they made decisions. And that is the key to catching up quickly. Yes, the technology is changing very fast, but if you are clear on every other part of the 5P framework, figuring out which technology to slot in is relatively straightforward. Getting all the other pieces is much harder. And if you're behind on those, that is harder to catch up with. That is harder to deal with being behind if you have no idea what your customers want, right? That's the stuff. So, are you behind? If you're unclear on more than one of the 5 Ps, then yeah, you're behind. Get clear on everything else besides the technology, especially when it comes to generative AI. Get clear on everything else. You can get help with the technology. Right? My company does that. You can even ask the language models themselves. You could say, hey, language model, here's the 5 Ps. I have 4 of the 5 all written out here. I need help choosing the platform. And the language models will do a decent job of recommending how to solve that problem if you're detailed enough in your analysis of the rest of it. When it comes to your fears, fight, freeze, or flight, those are the choices you have when you're dealing with your fears. In the context of generative AI, that means you either dig in, you do nothing, or you run away from the technology. I would suggest that digging in is the best course of action with generative AI, with the acknowledgement that, yes, overcoming fear can be an incredibly daunting task. But once you have the emotional willingness to dig in, you have a pathway forward for the rest. Use the 5P framework, use the TRIPS framework, etc., and you will get where you need to go. As always, shameless plug, if this is something you want help building in your company, doing like we did with Kara, hit me up. There's a link in the newsletter. All right. What else happened this week? Had a bunch of questions and answers on the blog, but over on the YouTube channel, I did a lukewarm take on all the major announcements from the primary keynote from Google I/O. I'm going to do another analysis of the developer keynote because I think that was even more relevant to us marketers than the flashy big show. But either way, the lukewarm take is about 40 minutes. It's over on YouTube. Go check it out. It's in the link. There's a link in the newsletter for it. Also have 3 new webinars up. Generative AI for food and beverage, which is basically the keynote from AFGC. Generative AI for architecture, engineering, and construction, which is an event from earlier this year. And generative AI for professional associations. So if you work in leadership at a professional association, go check that one out. Let's see, jobs this week. We have Chief Marketing Officer at Bullish Drive Agency, Chief Marketing Officer at Whale Pass, Demand Generation Director of Pharma at Barrington James, Director of Brand and Marketing at Stamara, Director of Marketing at Fuel Ed, Fractional Chief Marketing Officer at Stellar Collection, Head of Growth at Sharewell, Head of Marketing at Higher Boots, Head of Sales and Marketing at 80/20, Managing Director of Operations at Primacy, Marketing Director at AI Health, Senior Director of Growth Marketing at Storable, VP of Marketing at C Squared. I don't know how you pronounce that. VP of Marketing at Homoglow, VP of Marketing Communications at Execs in the Know, and VP of Growth Marketing at Active Campaign. So lots and lots of executive positions opening up this week. There's also go check out last week's Trust Insights newsletter. There's a whole thing on the marketing jobs market right now, which is not great in most places on the planet. So hopefully listing some of these open positions will help. Upcoming events. This week, I'm flying out to Los Angeles. So I've got to do a client meeting first, then fly out to Los Angeles for the Society for Marketing Professional Services. We're doing a 2-day workshop on AI with them. We have MACON, the Marketing AI Conference in Cleveland, Trace One User Conference in Miami, and the Marketing Cross BB Forum in Boston. And I believe there's more stuff yet in the works, so I'll be keeping that event calendar up to date. Also in June, I'll have a link for it at some point soon. The next webinar I'm doing is Generative AI for Sales. So if you want to be a part of that, stay tuned to the newsletter and I'll let you know when that's available. That is going to do it for this week's newsletter. Thank you, as always, for your attention and being here, for watching or listening or reading, however it is that you consume the newsletter. And I'll talk to you on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.